Nagas will never surrender to India, even here on earth or in heaven.
For nearly 8 decades, the Naga political struggle has remained India's longest-running insurgency. It survived India's independence, military campaigns, factional splits, and generations of leaders. Today, the future of that movement rests heavily on one man, Thwingling Muiva. At 92, he is the General Secretary of the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muiva faction. He is also known as Etokilonsar or Prime Minister of the Republic of Nagaland and affectionately called Uncle by many Nagas. He is the last surviving leader of the movement's founding generation. For many Nagas, he is the face of the struggle. For New Delhi, he remains the most important interlocutor in the search for a final peace settlement. But time is running out, and with it comes a question that has haunted the Northeast for decades. Can the Naga issue finally be resolved? Or will it outlive the generation that created it? Born in Somdal village, in Manipur's Ukhrul district in 1934, Muiva has lived through every phase of the Naga movement. Over 6 decades, he survived underground life, exile, armed conflict, and political upheaval. Alongside him stood Isaac Chishi Su. Together, the two men shaped the NSCN-IM and transformed it into a dominant force within Naga politics. In 2015, despite failing health, Isaac Su signed the historic framework agreement with the Government of India in the presence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It was expected to pave the way for a final settlement. Su died the following year, leaving Muiva as the sole surviving founder responsible for carrying the peace process forward. For most of his life, Muiva has remained underground, traveling across jungles of Myanmar and China, holding secret parleys with Indian government officials in different countries, only to return to his village Somdal in October last year in a chopper facilitated by the government of Nagaland, before going back to Hebron, the largest camp of the insurgent outfit in Nagaland. Today, Muiva's failing health has taken him to Dimapur, a 2 hours drive from Camp Hebron, where he is staying with his wife, Pakahau Muiva, following a strict routine of regular walks around the compound. Naga army commandos with sophisticated weapons guard him wherever he goes. But it is from here that Muiva continues to control the parallel government and the military might of the NSCN-IM at Camp Hebron, which wields influence across wide tracts of land in Indian territory as well as Naga-inhabited areas across the India-Myanmar border. The headquarters at Camp Hebron houses administrative offices of the NSCN-IM's parallel government, its own parliament, headquarters of the Naga army, court and jails. The organization claims to command thousands of cadres, including men and women. Nearly 3 decades after the ceasefire, the military infrastructure remains intact. Young soldiers, both men and women, continue to train in the vast jungles adjoining Hebron and in the borders with Myanmar. Within the largest insurgent camp, assault rifles, rocket-propelled grenades and military formations remain visible, demonstrating the lethal capabilities of the outfit that has carried out several attacks on Indian security forces over many decades. In recent years, Hebron has also embraced newer technologies. Drones are routinely flown over the headquarters and surrounding areas for surveillance. Sources familiar with the camp say anti-drone systems and jamming equipment have also been introduced to prevent unauthorized drones from entering Hebron's airspace. For Indian security agencies, these developments reinforce a simple reality. The ceasefire has reduced violence, but it has not dismantled the organization's military capabilities yet. One reason the Naga issue remains unresolved lies beyond India's borders. According to Indian security officials, the NSCN-IM never fully abandoned its sanctuaries in Myanmar. For decades, the organization built strategic depth across the frontier through training camps, logistical hubs, and military infrastructure. Even today, officials believe influential leaders continue to operate from outside India. Among them is former Naga army chief Phunting Shimrang, believed to be in China's Yunnan province. Officials say he continues to wield considerable influence within the organization. Alongside him is NSCN-IM's National Security Advisor Pamshin Muiwa, based in Myanmar. Another key figure is former Naga army chief Hanshi Ramsan, who leads a military formation known as the Eastern Flank. The group is believed to command around 250 cadres. His profile has grown after Ikato Chishisu, son of Isaac Su, joined hands with the formation. At the same time, another son of Isaac Su, Pashito Chishisu, remained associated with Hebron and worked within the organization's political structures, supporting his father until his death. Together, these leaders represent important centers of influence within the movement. Security officials believe they could become even more significant in a post-Muiwa era. Unlike Hebron, which remains inside India, Myanmar offers a difficult terrain and established networks, with military commanders revealing that if the Indian government decides to dismantle their existing presence in Hebron, the outfit could increasingly look towards these cross-border bases as alternative centers of authority. But that possibility remains distant as of now, as Muiwa increasingly appears focused on peace rather than conflict.
Framework agreement of the two entities, that was more or less initiated from our side also. Why? Because why should we go on killing each other? Why do we not try to understand each other? So, framework agreement of the two entities. We must try to understand each other. Yeah, even in the field of such harmful, inhuman treatment.
The Framework Agreement of 2015 remains the most significant milestone in the peace process. But more than a decade later, a final settlement remains elusive, with differences over issues such as a separate Naga flag and constitution, continuing to divide the two sides. The Government of India maintains that any solution must remain within the constitutional framework. The result has been a prolonged deadlock. The ethnic conflict in Manipur has further complicated the situation. Violence between Meitei and Kuki-Zo communities has altered political equations across the hills. Although the NSCN-IM has sought to avoid direct involvement, tensions have spread into Naga areas. Muiwa has accused the Indian side of supporting Kuki-Zo groups, a charge that New Delhi rejects.
They still give the chance to use the Indian forces against us. See? So, if you try to understand the attitude of the Indian towards the Nagas, yes, it is not very hard. They are using them. Indians are using the Kukis to kill the Nagas, and they have been killing even my people. It hurt us beyond words. No, we are ready to understand you. We are ready to understand you. But the problem is that the Indians are using you. The Indians are using the Kukis to finish us.
Many Naga leaders fear the unrest could further delay a final settlement. Meanwhile, an entire generation of Nagas has grown up after the 1997 ceasefire. While they have never witnessed the violence that once dominated the region, they continue to wait for peace. Across Nagaland and Naga-inhabited areas, there is fatigue. But there is also hope that future generations will not inherit the uncertainty that shaped the lives of their parents and grandparents. However, those who join the struggle today believe that the cause will outlive any challenges that may come up in coming months and years. For Indian officials, the present moment may represent the last opportunity to secure a durable peace. Their concern is not simply about Muiwa's age. It is about what comes after him. Without the authority of the founding generation, maintaining unity within the movement could become increasingly difficult. Officials familiar with the talks say the government is prepared to offer substantial autonomy within the constitutional framework, while maintaining that there is no scope for secession. Much depends on how the two sides bridge the gap between aspiration and reality. If a final agreement remains elusive, a post-Muiwa era could weaken the NSE and IM's unity and authority, giving the Indian security forces an edge. But what emerges as a looming threat is the diminishing influence of the moderate leadership that has spent years keeping sections of the movement committed to dialogue, without the weight and legitimacy of the founding generation. Some officials fear younger and more hardline elements could once again look towards armed resistance. The future of India's longest insurgency, therefore, now rests on a simple question. Can the movement's last surviving founder secure the peace he has spent a lifetime negotiating?